Hey guys, I'd like to share my Shankgonne Grenade Titan setup. It is currently level 97 and capable of running all content quite comfortably and quickly. It makes use of the new Shankgonne Unique Boots, which replaces your dodge roll and your sprint with the skill Black Powder Blitz, which is essentially just a leaping backflip that covers a pretty good distance and automatically detonates any grenades on the ground as you go. I think Shankgonnes are quite overlooked. They are currently worth essentially nothing. Because they have no movement speed and disable your sprint, at first glance they kind of just look like garbage, but if you can get a pretty good amount of cooldown reduction, then Black Powder Blitz ends up as a pretty good mobility skill regardless. The distance that I'm traveling here is not really accurate to what you see in maps. The distance of the jump scales with your movement speed. So once you get into a map, you proc your onslaught, you get some movement speed on kill, and the jump distance is quite a bit further. To illustrate this, here's a comparison of Black Powder Blitz at 3 different movement speeds. You can clearly see that at the lowest movement speed, not only is the jump extremely short, but it also takes longer to complete. So it's very important to pick up movement speed wherever you can. This is a fairly well-rounded spec. You're able to one-shot any of the Uber Pinnacles without any kind of bossing-specific setup. The mapping speed is pretty good, and you are actually relatively tanky for a grenade spec. When I'm in maps with my scavenged plating up, I'm at around 30k armor, 40k to elemental damage, and I have over 70% deflect rating. So not like a super tank by any means, but for a grenade spec, it's pretty good. In terms of budget, I would say you can start this build on about 3 to 4 divines worth of currency. That is enough to start one-shotting the Uber Pinnacles. Of course, I have more gear than that at this point, but it's not necessary. In each of the bossing showcases, I just kind of threw out like a single cluster grenade. When you're on a lower level of gear, you're of course not just going to use one grenade. You're going to toss out some gas grenades, explosive grenades, etc. And you can start popping the bosses on like fairly low currency. And that's just due to A, how insane the base damage on grenades are, B, how easy it is to craft cheap, good gear this league, and C, a couple mechanics in this build that give you like a ton of damage. For clearing, we throw out a flash grenade and detonate, and for bossing and rares, we throw out a cluster grenade and detonate. During the leveling process, you'll be using explosive grenade quite a bit more than these two because it has a lot more base damage than flash grenade and more charges than cluster grenade, but in the end game, you kind of one-shot everything, so flash grenade has the biggest radius for clearing, and cluster grenade just has the most damage on a single grenade for bossing. Build setup, we are running Shankgonnes of course for mobility and to detonate our grenades. We are running Constricting Command, it's just a very strong helmet. You do not require a -5 to get started on this build, a -4 is enough because we are kind of like a weird melee grenade spec where we're constantly backflipping into the mobs, so you don't actually require a -5. So just start out with a -4 if you don't have much currency to work with, and upgrade as you go. For our amulet, we are using Fire Flower. Again, like the Constricting Command, you don't need a corrupted +6. You can start out with a +4, which is extremely cheap. It's just a very cheap way of scaling both our damage and mobility. It works on both Explosive Grenade and our Cluster Grenade. Gives you more damage than an expensive +3 Proj Amulet, and it also scales your Black Powder Blitz level. Every even level interval, the base cooldown of Black Powder Blitz goes down, so scaling it with Fire Flower, scaling it with supports like either Fire Mastery or Uhtred's will bring the cooldown a lot lower. Now, Shankgonnes and Fire Flower have some really cool secondary interactions. Black Powder Blitz gives you a guaranteed blind and ignite on enemies that are nearby when you blast off. This guaranteed ignite procs your Fire Flower and causes you to take fire damage. Don't worry, you take basically like 1 fire damage because of armor applies to elemental damage taken, so it's very negligible. However, that 1 fire damage procs your Namahu's Chosen Charm and grants you up to your maximum rage. This gives you pretty much permanent maximum rage uptime throughout mapping and bossing because you're constantly backflipping around, igniting, proccing your Fire Flower, and proccing your Namahu's Chosen Charm. Additionally, because Black Powder Blitz is characterized as a leaping travel skill, you are able to support it with Holy Descent, which gives you Consecrated Ground when you land. Consecrated Ground gives you 5% max HP regen, as well as 50% reduced cursed effectiveness on you. This 5% regen allows us to run Berserk without really caring about the degen, because you're constantly standing on Consecrated Ground as you're backflipping throughout a map. So you're able to maintain maximum rage amplified by Berserk. We are taking a single rage cluster on the tree in order to get 47 max rage. All told, this gives us about a 1.8 times damage multiplier that regular grenade specs don't really have consistent access to. For my belt, I'm using a Headhunter because it's just the best endgame belt, but during the leveling process, you can either use a rare or a Helmet Darkness Enthroned, socketed with 2 soul cores of flow for cooldown recovery rate. You don't really need an expensive Darkness Enthroned. I think the intervals that kind of bring you to a new breakpoint are at 88, 100, and 113%, if I'm not mistaken. But you only go from like 30% CDR to 32 to 34. So you can just buy like an 88% with 2 charm slots for, I think, 1 Exalt, socket it with 2 soul cores, and this is a pretty good way to get cooldown reduction early in the game. For the rest of our gear, we're just using decent crafted rares. You definitely want a siege crossbow base for the extra grenade projectile. Start with 2 good damage prefixes. You can either use double fizz or something like flat fire, flat lightning. Perfect essence on, again, as whatever damage type of you're choosing. I have Rakiatas, so I just chose lightning for the shock, but if you don't have Rakiatas, I would probably do fire damage. Perfect essence of battle, perfect essence of haste, and Anunamu suffix desecrate for grenades have a chance to explode a second time. I won't go too far into like how to craft these items in this video. If you guys want, I can make another video on how to craft these pieces for very low currency, but that takes a little bit too much time for a build showcase. For your gloves, you just want good life. Armor applies to elemental damage taken. Fill out some resistances. If you can get a good flat damage roll, that's pretty nice, but not mandatory. For your body armor, just big armor. Armor applies to elemental damage taken, resistances. These are all really, really cheap to craft. You can craft any of these pieces on like 1 to 2 divines. For your rings, you don't need big flat on your rings for this build. It's like really overloaded with damage already, so I'm actually not even really running much flat on my gear at all. I'm just running like a single fire damage roll on each piece. But if you want to really min-max your damage, sorry, my cat is on my keyboard. If you want to min-max your damage, you can of course get triple flat rings. There's like no content in the end game right now that necessitates that much damage, so I'm just running, you know, life and rarity, some resists. If you want to really push your cooldown reduction rate, you can use the Kurgal Desecrate, Suffix Desecrate, for up to 12% CDR. I have it on 1 ring. I would say this is not mandatory. It's kind of like a very late game upgrade, because if you're running Headhunter, you're running Shankgonne, Fireflower, and Constricting Command, you're pretty pressed for resistances. You don't have a lot of affixes left to get rarity and resistances, so CDR on rings is like very supplemental. It's not mandatory. I only have it on 1 ring, but it is an option. For our flask, we are running an Olroth's because Olroth's is just insane for survivability on any life build. Mana flask doesn't really matter. We don't really use mana because of Constricting Command plus Defy 2, as well as Ataluis on our Cluster Grenade. So you just pick up something with 67% increased charges, and this is to scale our Ambrosia on our Cluster Grenade. Charms, of course, Namahu's Chosen. You want a Rite of Passage if you can afford it. It's not that important, but it's nice to have. You can either run a Spirit of the Wolf or a Spirit of the Bear for this build. Spirit of the Wolf gives you movement speed, which is really nice. It gives you... The skill speed doesn't really do anything for this build, but it does also give you Armor Break, which allows you to not have to run that on your Flash Grenade and still break armor to get Scavenged Plating stacks. Alternatively, you can run Armor Break on your Flash Grenade and run Spirit of the Bear, which just gives you a ton of max life, stun threshold, you know, reduced damage taken, really, really good for tankiness in, you know, like juiced up overrun maps. On the passive tree, we're basically just stacking a bunch of AoE, a bunch of armor, a bunch of CDR, some damage, and that's about it. I chose to run this from Titan because Titan just amplifies all of those stats, get a lot of life, get a lot of armor. Armor just feels really good this league because of armor applies to elemental damage taken. But I would say Titan is definitely not mandatory for this. I think you could run this type of spec from almost any of the mercenary ascendancies, as well as like a Deadeye is, of course, you know, movement speed plus 1 prod, it's tailwind, it's great. Just a kind of awkward starting position on the tree. But I would say you could probably run this from quite a number of ascendancies. I think Titan's just a nice straightforward way to get lots of stats, lots of AoE for big boom booms. I'll of course have my profile linked in the video description if you want to go into the tree in more depth. In terms of jewels, Titan is just really good with any time loss jewels because it scales the time loss jewel passives. So we're running an Against the Darkness in one of the surrounded cluster areas. This basically just gives us a ton of resistances because it's kind of hard to cap res with Headhunter. If you don't have Headhunter, you can run another time loss jewel here, or you can run Against the Darkness with gain as damage. But this is giving us like 6% fire res and 4% chaos res per small node. They're not too expensive. I think I picked this up for 3 divines. It just really helps you cap your resists out. Near the other surrounded cluster, we are running a Time Lost Emerald with notable passive skills and radius, grant 3% CDR, and a bunch of damage and some life recovery from the small passive skills. This is also scaled up by Hulking Form, so I think in total I'm getting upwards of 70% damage, like, 36% life recovery from flasks, and 15% CDR from this Time Lost. It cost me like 1 divine. There are other good options, such as increased effect of small or notable passive skills and radius as well. You don't need one exactly like mine, but yeah, Time Lost rules really, really good on this setup. I am running a Heart of the Well. Heart of the Well can roll up to 18% cooldown recovery rate, great for scaling your grenades, great for scaling your mobility. If you can get some extra perks like gain as damage, that's nice. Recover 1% of maximum HP or mana, really, really good. The mana recover does nothing for me in this build because I'm running Constricting Command, but ideally, if you can get one with recover percent of maximum life on kill, that's the best, but that might be kind of expensive. Because I don't have that, I am running Cannibalism on my Scavenged Plating, but if you get it on a Jewel, you can drop this and use the 15 Spirit for something else. Last Jewel, I'm using a Megalomaniac with Primal Growth, which is basically just 23% AoE while clearing, and favorable odds, which is definitely not that important. You can just grab this manually, but it gives me 3% more CDR from my Time Lost, as well as some deflection rating and ailment and stun threshold. Now, on the topic of deflection rating, I think the deflect rating line on the Shankgonnes are extremely underrated and overlooked. Like, at first glance, it doesn't seem that important because armor can't really scale deflection rating up like evasion can. However, with my Scavenged Plating up, I'm at literally over 70% chance to deflect just off of this one line alone. Because I also have Guaranteed Blind off of the Shankgonnes, that further feeds into the deflect rating. It doesn't show on tooltip, but it pumps me up to like almost 75% deflect rating, which I think is kind of crazy for a single line on these boots. The reason for this is that armor specs get to take glancing blows. Evasion blows can't really access this because your chance to evade is unlucky. We don't care about this as an armor spec, so we get chance to deflect as lucky. We just get like a mind-boggling amount of deflect for basically no investment, just the boots and glancing blows. As an alternative to the Megalomaniac, if you're just not able to find a good roll, because these are kind of scarce, you can run a Prism of Belief with +3 level of flash grenades. Cluster grenade and explosive grenade are good too, but they're just way too expensive. I picked this one up for about 3 divines. And this just scales your flash grenade damage and radius really, really hard for clearing. For skill setup, before I start, I want to stress that you absolutely do not require these expensive lineage support gems that I have socketed in. They are not mandatory, and to be honest, they actually don't even do that much more than regular support gems for this setup. They're nice to have, but I just don't have anything else to spend money on because this build doesn't really use very expensive gear. The boots are like 1 exalt. I crafted all my gear pieces for like 1 to 2 divs. I kind of just don't have anything to spend money on, so I bought lineage gems. But again, they're not mandatory. You don't need these. There's very appropriate replacements. So for Black Powder Blitz, what's mandatory is cooldown recovery and Holy Descent. And then you can either run Uhtred's Augury or Fire Mastery plus another. You really do not need Uhtred's. It doesn't do that much for you. But just to kind of show this here, my current cooldown on Black Powder Blitz is 0.97 seconds. If I replace this with Fire Mastery, it is, let's see here, 1 second. It's 0.03 seconds that I'm spending. I don't even know how much this costs now, like 20 divines. Let me see here. Uhtred's Augury, divine, 40 divines. Don't buy this, okay? It's absolutely worthless. Like, you get 0.03 seconds off of your Black Powder Blitz, and you lose the support slot. I just have nothing to spend money on. So you can run Fire Mastery plus whatever you want in the last slot, like Fire Exposure if you don't have Rakiatas. You can run Magnified Effect, Fiery Death. There's a lot of like kind of interesting options, but yeah, I'm running Uhtred's for 40 divines for 0.03 seconds of cooldown. Very, very worthwhile. In terms of support slots, Black Powder Blitz, because it's based on your Shankgonnes, you need a higher level Shankgonne in order to unlock level 20 Black Powder Blitz if you want all of the support slots. But to be honest, I don't think there's anything that important to run, so I'm just running a level 19. It's way cheaper. Level 19 costs 1 Exalt, level 20 costs like 20 Divines. It doesn't really make a difference because I really don't think there's anything that important to run. Additionally, like I talked about before, Black Powder Blitz, the cooldown only scales down at even level intervals. And you're always getting +4 or +6 from Fire Flower, and you're getting either +1 or +3 from Fire Mastery or Uhtred's. So level 19 to level 20 doesn't actually scale up or scale down your cooldown because it takes you to an odd level interval, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would just pick up a level 19 for 1 Exalt. If you have money, you can pick up an exceptional base with 2 sockets. This one cost me about 1 Divine, and then I corrupted it for fire resistance. Whatever Shankgonne you pick up, before you corrupt it, make sure you quality it, because the quality of Black Powder Blitz is based on the quality on your Shankgonnes, and the quality of Black Powder Blitz gives cooldown recovery rate. So make sure you quality it up before corrupting, and make sure you corrupt your Shankgonnes because they cost nothing. You can always pick up another pair. Flash Grenade. I am running Magnified Area, Defy 2. This is actually, I don't even need this. I don't know why I'm running it because I have mana on kill on my Heart of the Well. So I could replace this for something else, but whatever. Defy 2 is fine. It gives you lucky hit hacks. I'm running Rigwald's Ferocity because it's on my second weapon set. This is not mandatory. You can run something else. Nova Projectiles. This gives you like really nice coverage, and if you instant detonate, it also, like all of the Nova Projectiles overlap in Shotgun, so it's also a good damage link. This thing's just kind of OP. And then I'm running Cooldown Recovery. This does like nothing for me. The reason I run this is so that I can just constantly spam Flash Grenade into my jump. But because we have so much cooldown recovery already, there's really not a big difference. You can see I can kind of do it anyways. And then like maybe every 4 Flash Grenades, you can just toss in a cluster, and your Flash Grenade will go back to full charges. So this is kind of a dead link for me. I'm not quite sure what to run in it, to be honest. You can put like faster projectiles so that your grenades go out a little bit faster and you get better coverage. You can put like Deliberation for some more damage. The movement speed penalty doesn't matter because you just instantly jump anyways if you want to. If you are not running a Rite of Passage, you run Armor Break 3 here in order to generate Scavenged Plating stacks off of fully broken armor. Explosive Grenade I don't really use anymore. Cluster Grenade, you run Ambrosia for a bunch of extra lightning damage off of your flask charges. Again, make sure you have at least 67% increased charges on an ultimate mana flask. You don't need more, it doesn't make any difference, so just get the cheapest one you can. I'm running Ata Louise because it's a lot of damage. Additionally, because it has a life cost on it, it means like I can pre-pop my Olrots before I head into like a really dangerous pack. So for example, I could Cluster Grenade, pop my Olrots, jump, and I get a bunch of guard so that I have like some extra defensive layer against one-shots because, you know, life is still not good against one-shots. Rakiata's Flow. This is not mandatory. It's barely even better than Payload. It's worse than Payload for like 99% of content. It's only better versus Uber Pinnacles because Cluster Grenade is actually primarily physical damage. So you can run Payload if you don't have Rakiatas. This is just like a little bit of extra damage against like Uber Zesht. Now, mandatory on Cluster Grenades are Nova Projectiles and Adhesive Grenades. Adhesive Grenades is a really interesting support for Cluster Grenades. If you don't run it, this is what Cluster Grenades looks like. You toss it out, the clusters boom, and then you get some secondary booms, and it takes quite a bit of time. There's a lot of delay to it, which makes it very unpleasant to use for one-shots, very unpleasant to use for mapping. But when you put in Adhesive Grenades, I'll show you what happens. The first grenades explode, and then the secondary grenades instantly explode as soon as they hit the ground. So the overall effect is much, much faster, which makes it better QOL for mapping. And it also means for bossing purposes, you can get a very, very tight radius like this, because the secondary grenades aren't rolling and spreading out. So you can shotgun the boss with a ton of secondary explosions. This is what makes your cluster grenade do so much damage to bosses on a per grenade basis. Lastly, Nova Projectiles has effectively double dipping with Cluster Grenade because not only are you generating more primary grenades, when the primary grenades detonate, you get more secondary grenades as well. So Nova Projectiles, double dips with Cluster Grenade, these two supports are, at least to my understanding and my experience, mandatory. I'm running Rapid Shot. I basically never use this. This is just when you're heading into like an Uber Pinnacle, you can toss out some Rapid Shot, build up some heat for your Cluster Grenade for it to do some more damage. I'm running Rapid Attacks, Streamlined Rounds, Nimble Reload, Mobility. Yeah, I barely ever use this, but it's kind of a nice setup to have. This is how I swap between my 2 weapon sets. Everything that I have is on both weapon sets, but my Rapid Shot is on weapon set 1 for bossing, and my Flash Grenade is on weapon set 2 for... My Flash Grenade is on weapon set 2 for clearing. For my auras, I'm running Scavenged Plating, Berserk, and Wind Dancer. Scavenged Plating just gives you 40% more armor while you're mapping. Just make sure you have some form of armor break, either supported in your Flash Grenade or on a Rite of Passage. Support it with Prolonged Duration, and then the rest don't really matter. I have Cannibalism because I don't have Life Recovery on a Jewel. Berserk you support with Uhtred's Exodus, which is super cheap. This gives you a lot more damage. And then the last slot, Wind Dancer, is not really... I don't even know what the best option for the last slot is. For most of the leveling process, I was running Herald of Ash. But I play on a laptop and I'm kind of laggy, so I took off Herald of Ash because it wasn't doing that much for my clear. Flash Grenade has like a really clean AoE radius, AoE clear as is, and HOA has a lot of particles, but you can run Herald of Ash, you can run some other Herald. I'm running Wind Dancer because it's just generically quite good. You're constantly jumping into packs, so if there's some kind of dangerous situation, the mobs just kind of get pushed away and damaged. I'm running Magnified Area, Life Leech, Knockback, Armor Break, and Rage on my Wind Dancer. Now, I do want to quickly talk about why I don't run Temporalis. If all you care about is clear speed, Temporalis is theoretically the max cap for this build. The main problem with Temporalis is simply that you are super squishy. You would be running Constricting Command, Fireflower, Temporalis, Headhunter, Shankgonnes. You don't really have any slots left to pick up defenses. Whereas with a nice rare armor chest synergizing with Titan, you actually get quite tanky just off of the chest plate alone. Now, the amount of clear speed that you get out of Temporalis is actually not that high until you have a bunch of movement speed stacked from Headhunter. The reason for this, even though Black Powder Blitz displays a use time of 0.7 seconds, so you would kind of assume, hey, you want to reach 0.7 seconds cooldown or below. In reality, at around 0 to 20% movement speed, the actual use time of the skill is closer to around 0.9 seconds. I timed this with a metronome, because there's a bit of a delay before you can actually cast it again. So at a baseline, because you can already reach pretty close to 0.9 seconds without Temporalis, I think there's not much reason to actually give up your chest slot for it. The exception comes when you actually stack up your Headhunter, you pick up like Haste Arrow, you pick up Hasted. If you have a bunch of movement speed, like I talked about earlier in the video, the use time of Black Powder Blitz scales down with your movement speed. So the only way to unlock like the maximum clear speed once you have Headhunter buffs scaled up is to have Temporalis and to have a cooldown that's like 0.5 seconds, right? 0.6 seconds, something like that. But I'd say the clear speed on this build is pretty good as is. I'm more comfortable having a bit more tankiness, so yeah, that's why I choose not to run Temporalis. Lastly, I'd just like to kind of talk about my personal thoughts and feelings playing the build. It is really fun. I very rarely push characters past the low level 90s because I get kind of bored. I feel like the character's relatively complete and I'd like to reroll and try a new build. This character I've pushed to level 97. I'll cap it off maybe around level 98, something like that. It's just really fun to play. You can run whatever you want. It's very comfortable in any kind of content. It's very quick. The playstyle is really fun. You're just, bunny hopping and backflipping and booming all around the map. Now, downsides, as like a fair warning before you guys try it, number one, I would say the most devastating thing to the build is the lack of phasing in POE2. You can get stuck on mobs during Black Powder Blitz if you're not careful, or if you're in very narrow layouts like Mire, for example, or some of the Citadel layouts. It can be pretty annoying running those kinds of layouts because you can't really flip around them, so you end up flipping into the mobs. This is partly why I think Titan is so nice for the AoE, so you kind of clear more in front of you, but it's pretty unavoidable in like narrow indoors layouts, Mire. You will get stuck on mobs sometimes during your Black Powder Blitz, which is really annoying, and which is why I kind of like Wind Dancer. So number one, be careful of that. Number two, I'd say you kind of need the whole spec to come together before it really feels good, because you're running a grenade spec, but you're like backflipping straight into the mobs, and then you can't detonate again until your next grenade into backflip rotation. So if you don't have enough cooldown reduction to do that quickly, you're just standing in front of the mobs for a little bit. You're not squishy, but you're not as tanky as like an actual warrior build. So like you're gonna be taking damage during that interval, and if you're doing like the grenade flip, if you're not like one-shotting the screen as you're going, there's going to be quite a bit of like backtracking, right? It doesn't feel that good. So you do kind of need the build to fully come together. You need the AoE, you need the damage, you need the tankiness, you need the CDR before the character really feels good. And before that point, it feels a little bit awkward, and you maybe even want to level with like mortars or like, without the Shankgonnes or something like that. On the bright side, it doesn't take that much to get the build together. It's a fairly cheap spec. Again, just 3 to 4 divs is enough. But yeah, fair warning. So yeah, that's about all I have on this build. I hope this inspires some of you to take a look at the Shankgonne boots. They are genuinely my favorite unique in all of POE1 and POE2. I think they have excellent design. They are very easy to overlook because they don't have the generic strong stats on boots, aka movement speed. But they absolutely work your gameplay and have so many interesting different elements to check out and so many different ways to build around them. I'm choosing to do grenades, but you could absolutely try to scale this in different ways. There's so many ideas that I have for the Shankgonne boots. So yeah, hopefully this inspires some of you to check the boots out. I think they're really fun. Let me know how it goes.